The Stoic method to control your personal finances right now begins with the recognition that wealth is not measured by the abundance of coins in your hand, but by the mastery you hold over your desires. For true prosperity is not what you own, but how you govern yourself. Imagine for a moment walking into the bustling streets of ancient Rome, where merchants cry out to sell silks from the east, spices from distant lands, and jewels that sparkle in the sunlight, where senators in fine robes boast of their estates, and soldiers return from conquest, carrying treasures looted from fallen cities. To the eye, it appears as though power and wealth fill every corner. Yet in the quiet shadows of a tent pitched far from the marble palaces, Marcus Aurelius, emperor of Rome and master of vast resources, bends over a small wax tablet and writes to himself, not about riches, not about indulgence, but about restraint, about the need to govern his own mind more carefully than he governs legions. The paradox is sharp and unforgettable. The man who holds the empire of the world must still remind himself each day not to be enslaved by the very abundance that surrounds him. This truth, as alive today as it was 2,000 years ago, invites us to ask whether we are any freer with our credit cards, our investments, our endless advertisements, and our dreams of luxury than those Romans chasing silver and silk. When you picture the modern marketplace, glowing screens filled with the promise of possessions, quick profits, and comforts beyond measure, are you any different than the man in Rome clutching coins, fearful of losing them, desperate to gain more, never resting because the hunger is never satisfied? The Stoic method answers this restlessness with clarity. To control your finances is first to control your mind. For without discipline in thought, there can be no discipline in money. Seneca, who possessed wealth greater than nearly any Roman of his time, warned in his writings that poverty can force restraint, but luxury whispers dependency. Poverty forces you to eat only what you have, but luxury seduces you into believing that joy cannot exist without feasts and finery. This whisper is more dangerous than hunger itself, for it convinces the soul that comfort is necessary. And once you believe comfort is owed, you are never free. Marcus Aurelius internalized this warning. In his meditations, written only for his own reflection, he constantly reminded himself that estates could burn, that legions could be defeated, that the throne itself could collapse, and that the only possession truly immune to fortune was the strength of his reason and the discipline of his will. This is where the Stoic method begins, by placing money in its rightful place as a tool rather than a master. To understand this, imagine walking again through the Roman Forum. Coins clink in the air, bargains are shouted, crowds press against each other in search of advantage. Everyone is chasing permanence, yet all that they hold will pass through their fingers like dust. The emperors whose names once commanded armies lie in tombs, with no more power than the slaves buried beside them. Wealth fades, monuments crumble, titles vanish, but the mind that has learned sufficiency endures. The Stoics taught that the richest man is not he who has the most, but he who needs the least. Consider how this applies to our world today. Banks measure us by credit scores. Markets rise and fall in chaotic rhythm, and advertisements scream that without the newest object, we are incomplete. Yet if your happiness depends on numbers on a screen, if your peace rests on luxuries that can be stolen, taxed, or erased by disaster, then you are not free. You are in chains. To live with discipline is to carry money like a traveler carries a cloak, useful when the night is cold, welcome when needed, but never mistaken as the essence of life itself. Marcus Aurelius owned estates beyond measure. He commanded legions of soldiers, and he could summon treasures from every corner of the empire. And yet, he reminded himself daily that none of it defined him, that fortune could withdraw it all, and that he must be prepared to walk calmly, even if it vanished. Imagine him surrounded by weary soldiers on the frontier, writing in candlelight that wealth and fame are smoke, and that the soul must stand unshaken as fortune gives and fortune takes. This vision carries to our age with startling relevance. Every advertisement, every message in the digital marketplace insists that joy is one purchase away. But joy is not a purchase. It is a practice. It is cultivated through the mastery of desire, through the courage to say no when indulgence beckons, through the wisdom to recognize that to live with less and yet feel no lack is greater wealth than to live with abundance and feel constant hunger. Epictetus, born a slave, with no property, no status, and no physical freedom, declared himself freer than emperors, because his judgments were his own and no man could command his will. Here is the clearest proof that freedom and wealth are not measured in possessions, but in the dominion of the mind. Imagine standing in front of a mirror, holding not a purse of coins, but the weight of your choices. Each time you choose patience over haste, generosity over greed, restraint over indulgence, you place another coin in the treasury of true wealth, a treasury that no thief can steal and no inflation can erode. The Stoic method to control your finances right now is not a set of tricks for investments or hidden strategies for savings, though those may help. It is the deeper work of seeing money as indifferent, of learning that its value lies only in how you use it. If it serves justice, if it supports generosity, if it fulfills duty, then it is good. If it feeds vanity, envy, or fear, then it is poison. This clarity transforms your relation to wealth immediately. When you feel the chains of debt pulling down your spirit, when you envy what others own, when you labor endlessly in pursuit of more, pause and remember the words of the Stoics. Freedom does not come when you acquire everything you want. It comes when you master the ability to live without what you do not need. Ask yourself, as Marcus asked himself, what truly belongs to you? Not your possessions, not your reputation, not your fortune, for these can all be lost. What remains is your character, your discipline, your courage to endure. This is the fortress that no misfortune can conquer. So as you listen to these words, reflect on the life you are building. Is your wealth in possessions, or is it in the calm dominion of your soul? Are you enslaved by desire, or are you free through discipline? The Stoic method does not demand that you reject money. It demands that you govern it, that you carry it lightly, that you use it wisely, and that you never bow before it as an idol. When you understand this, you understand the path to true financial freedom, one that no market crash can erase and no thief can touch. For wealth is a shadow, virtue is the substance, and the man who governs his mind governs his fortune. Imagine the markets of Rome falling silent. Imagine the palaces of emperors crumbling to dust. Imagine all the coins melted back into the earth, and what remains is the soul that stands calm, unbroken, and unshaken. That is true wealth, and it is waiting not tomorrow, not in the next purchase, but right now, in the quiet discipline of your own mind. And so the Stoic method to control your personal finances right now becomes less about numbers and more about wisdom, less about strategies and more about perspective. Because when you reshape the way you see money, every choice you make begins to change. Think again of Marcus Aurelius, who could have indulged in limitless luxury, but instead reminded himself that possessions are borrowed, that life is brief, and that the true task of a man is to live with integrity rather than indulgence. His meditations are not speeches of triumph, but reminders to himself to stay humble, to accept loss, to be ready at any moment to part with what fortune has given. This is the same attitude that allows us today to walk with calm even when bills press in, or when envy threatens to corrode our contentment. Seneca once wrote that the man who adapts his desires to his situation is truly rich, while the man who expands his desires endlessly is always poor, no matter his estate. Picture the difference. One man owns little, but wakes each morning with gratitude, unburdened by comparison, living with sufficiency and peace. Another owns much, yet trembles at the thought of losing it, envies neighbors who own more, and fears the turn of fortune that could take it all away. Who is wealthier? The Stoic answer is clear. Wealth is not the abundance of possessions, but the absence of want. This perspective is not simply philosophical decoration. It has direct power over how we manage our finances. When you realize that you do not need every new possession, you spend less. When you remind yourself that luxury can seduce you into dependency, you resist the urge to overspend. When you practice voluntary simplicity, even in small acts like eating modestly or delaying a purchase, you strengthen the muscle of discipline, and this discipline translates directly into financial stability. Imagine practicing this today. You receive your wages. You see the advertisements calling for new devices or luxuries, and you pause. You remember the words of Marcus Aurelius that wealth is smoke, that possessions are fleeting, and you ask yourself, is this purchase serving justice, generosity, and wisdom? Or is it feeding envy, vanity, and fear? By filtering every choice through this lens, you transform your finances not by external trickery but by internal mastery. The chains of debt loosen when you no longer need constant indulgence. The fear of scarcity fades when you learn to feel sufficiency. The endless chase of comparison ends when you realize that the richest man is he who desires the least. Picture Epictetus, once a slave with no wealth, standing before his students declaring that freedom rests not in possessions, but in the mastery of thought. He had no coins to lose, no estates to manage, and yet he was freer than those who sat in palaces, because his will was his own. This is the heart of the Stoic method applied to money. Freedom from fear of loss, freedom from envy of others, freedom from the endless hunger for more. As you stand in your own life, surrounded by the pressures of bills, by the noise of advertising, by the temptation to measure your worth against others, remember the campfire of Marcus, the letters of Seneca, the lessons of Epictetus. They all point to the same truth. Money can never buy freedom, but freedom can be yours the moment you master your desire. Imagine yourself years from now looking back. Will you see a life spent chasing every possession, anxious with every change, always reaching for more, and never satisfied? Or will you see a life lived with discipline, with clarity, with gratitude, where wealth served you, but never owned you? The choice is not distant. It is here, in this very moment, in the way you think about money today. The Stoic method to control your finances right now is a call to act, not with haste but with wisdom, to make every choice a reflection of virtue rather than vanity. When you do this, you build a treasury no thief can steal, no market can destroy, and no misfortune can erase. It is the treasury of discipline, of courage, of wisdom, and it waits for you not in distant fortunes, but in the quiet dominion of your own mind. And so the final question remains, one that the Stoics would ask and that you must ask yourself. Do you wish to be rich in possessions that fade, or rich in freedom that endures? For in the end, to control your finances is to control yourself, and he who governs his own soul walks unbroken, untouchable, and truly wealthy.